this computer. There we go. Okay, I have 10 a.m. I am recording the open portions of today's meeting, and somebody else is trying to join. Let's see who this is. Oh, no, maybe that was just someone accepting. Okay. Let me go back to my script. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Beverly School Committee of the Whole. Today is Saturday, December 14th, 2024. We are using a remote meeting platform and have provided this link to the public. I will be recording the open portions of today's session. Beginning on June 16, 2021, with chapters 20 of the Acts of 2021, which were twice extended and now further extended until March 31st, 2025, local governments and boards were granted provisions to, among other things, hold meetings remotely by suspending the need for the quorum and chair to physically be present. It does ask our body to use technical methods to allow for safe public access. As a note, Beverly also has prior approval for remote participation of members, although through that permission, the chair and a quorum do need to be physically present when this act and its extensions expire. Today is a committee of the whole meeting, which means there are no opportunities for members of the public to address the body. The next opportunity will be at our January regular school committee meeting. Members of the public that wish to speak may email residentvoice@beverlyschools.org or use in-person meeting signups at the podium on that evening. We do ask people to limit their remarks to 3 minutes, and your name and address will be stated for the record. Today, we are joined by members of the school committee and the leadership team. I will do a quick roll call. We have Mayor Cahill is absent and Kim Coelho is absent. We are joined by Dr. Kenan Mackenzie DeFranza online, as well as Karen Robinson and Dr. Jeffrey Silva and Miss Lorinda Visnick. We also have Dr. Suzanne Juracek, and I am Rachel Abel. We have a short agenda this morning. The first item will be to vote to meet in executive session. Then we will return to open session where we will vote on the Unit B Memorandum of Understanding for a successor agreement. And we will also vote on the selection of Saturdays for our school calendar as the makeup days from the strike. Those are the only agenda items we're entertaining today. And so now the chair makes the motion that we vote to meet in executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, for the following purpose. Purpose number 3. Purpose number 3 is to discuss strategy with respect to and in preparation for collective bargaining with the Beverly Teachers Association Units A, B, and C, because an open discussion may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee, and we will return to open session. Do I have a second?
Second.
I heard Karen first. Thank you, Karen. This requires a roll call vote, both because of the nature of the motion and because we are remote. I'm noting that Mayor Cahill and Kimberly Coelho are still absent. Kenan Mackenzie DeFranza?
Yes.
Thank you. Karen Robinson?
Yes.
Jeffrey Silva?
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick?
Yes.
And Rachel Abel, yes. With a vote of 5-0, I am now restating that the Committee of the Whole for the Beverly Public Schools School Committee is going into open session, and we will return to open session after this brief executive session. This is pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21A, for purpose number 3. 3 is to discuss strategy with respect to and preparation for collective bargaining with the Beverly Teachers Association Unit A, B, and C, because an open discussion may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee. And again,
Miss Abel,
yes.
we're going into executive session and we will return to open. I believe you
Yes.
were perhaps dyslexic in what you just said,
Oh, we will return to open session.
and
Yeah.
we're heading into executive session.
We are heading into executive session.
Yes.
Restating it for the record. Okay,
Thank
I'm
you.
going to pause the recording. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. The school committee is now returned to open session. Again, today is Saturday, December 14th. The time is 10:15 a.m., and we are returning to our agenda. The first item is to vote on Unit B, Memorandum of Understanding for ratification. This was signed by the negotiating team and members of the Unit B negotiating team on Thursday, December 12th. And I would ask, are there any comments or questions from the committee before I call the roll on ratifying this memorandum of understanding?
Do we need a motion and or a
Oh,
second before we go
yes,
into
we do need
discussion?
that. Thank you, Ms. Visnick. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the MOU as signed on December 12th with Unit B.
Second.
I heard Carrie Ann Mackenzie DeFranza that time. And we're just gonna let Dr. Morgan in. So we're in open session and we have a motion on the table to approve the memorandum of understanding from December 12th with Unit B. Motion was made by Rachel Abel and seconded by Dr. Ken and Mackenzie DeFranza. Now, are there any comments or questions? Okay, this is for a 3-year term beginning on July 1st of 2024 and running through June 30th, 2027. Just state that for the record. I will now call the roll. Mayor Cahill is absent. Kimberly Coelho is absent. Ken Ann Mackenzie DeFranza.
Yes.
Thank you. Karen Robinson,
Yes.
Jeffrey Silva,
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick,
Yes.
and Rachel Abel, yes. By a vote of 5-0 with 2 absences, the memorandum of understanding with Unit B is now ratified by the school committee. The time is 10:17 a.m. I will notify the union as well as our business office. The next agenda item we have for this brief committee of the whole meeting is to review the Saturdays that were selected as the makeup days per our vote on Wednesday. We had asked the superintendent to look at the calendar for which Saturdays would make the most sense. We had a suggestion come forward, but this would be an opportunity to have some discussion before we make the motion to accept these dates. So in the packet, it was identified that January 25th would be a good Saturday. It is a shortened week due to a holiday Monday, so that would create a 5-day school week. And then for the remainder, February, March, April, and May, it seemed the second Saturday might be the best day. I don't know how many members, oh, I see Dr. Silva's hand. I don't know how many members received a couple of email concerns about Saturdays, but that might be a question we have. Go ahead, Dr. Silva.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going with my question. Given some of the reaction that we've received, we're not going to be able to make everyone happy, obviously. But it may be worth maybe taking away 1 or 2 Saturdays and adding it to the end as a way to compromise. And, I mean, I'd leave that up to superintendent, but if it's possible, if there's a way to, take 1 or 2 away, that might be worth considering.
That's interesting. So I will just say that, I had received feedback that if we entertain Saturdays, why don't we also entertain Sundays? I think that's a valid point. I also heard from a number of youth sports groups that the April and May dates were going to be really tricky, a little bit more so than perhaps, getting a couple under our belt in the winter months. And so one of the questions, I had also was about that May 10th date and whether we could make it up sooner. I think the concern I have is with Mother Nature and what she may have planned in terms of weather, that even if we have earlier dates scheduled, there's no guarantee that they will run. I see 2 more hands. Dr. Mackenzie, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, I was wondering whether there was a way to maybe move the last Saturday in May to another option. I don't know whether Dr. Trochek was able to identify any half days that could be full instructional days. So I wanted to ask about that.
Do you want me to answer?
Yes, please.
Okay. So first of all, I've been working on clarity around the half days. We have 3 half days built into the calendar that could be moved to full instructional days, although one of them is the last day of school. Again, that is traditionally a half day, but there's not a rule against it being a half day. So that's one option. We have March 12th is an early release day, and May 23rd is an early release day. Those are days that precede the May 1 precedes Memorial Day weekend, and has traditionally been an early release day as well. And then the last day is always scheduled as an early release day. So that's one thought. The other thought is, if we look at the schedules for the Saturdays, I think that we've been talking a lot about the ability to add early release days for elementary, but not high school. So flipping the bus schedule so that the middle school gets out before the high school, lengthening the high school day by a little, capturing some time that way. I think the length of the day, I think if we hit 4.5 to 5 hours, I'm waiting for confirmation from DESE, we can consider them full days as long as we serve lunch. So that's also something that I'm working on. So I would suggest to you that we would be having a different length of day on Saturday than the typical schedule runs. I think getting out at 3:15 on Saturday for middle schoolers is really not, I think that's challenging. However, I don't want to compromise instructional time for the students because they've missed instructional time. So that's the balance that I'm kind of working on. So that's one thing in accordance to that. I did also want to point out, and I've gotten some other suggestions from folks. Rachel, I don't know if you want me to float out other ideas that I have heard from people.
Okay.
One of them is that I had originally put on the one that came out to you April 12th. That is the first, so at sundown on April 12th, it begins Passover. I don't know. I think if Passover were to fall on a weekday, we would probably have held school anyway if it was a sundown one. But I just wanted to put that on the radar for folks that might be a question we get. I've heard a lot of feedback about the May Day, understanding that it's later in the year. There was a suggestion that we consider January 4th, and I just want to explain why January 4th might be challenging, but might not be challenging. And so I'll give you all the details and let you all have all the information you need. January 4th is within a 30-day window. We have an obligation to make a 30-day notice to the union when we're scheduling a makeup day. We sat with them and got an MOU for the December 23rd day. But with that came a lot of compromise around pre-existing travel, personal day requests, and some of that. I'm not sure if January 4th would bring the same amount of that because the 2nd and 3rd are school days. So, it might not be as challenging. But that's one thing. So we would have to, first of all, get an MOU with the union to be able to use that January 4th day. But there's also some positives to that. Getting one under our belts early, folks can have less stress about what a Saturday feels like. And then my final, and these are all just ideas for you to all think about. I'm not, one or the other is, however, any combination of anything that I say is always on the table. The last thing is we do have 6 days. We were with the adding the 5 Saturdays, it left us the last day on June 20th, the last day with 5 snow days, June 27th. There still is that June 30th leeway day. So should you want to go to 4 Saturdays or, whatever, that's all. I just wanted you to know that, there would be. Right now, our official last day in our 185-day schedule that we'll submit to DESE is June 27th because of the way that you had adopted the 5 days. So I know that's a lot of information, but I just thought you're better off to know more than not. I will say that the dates that we had chosen, the January 25th, the February 8th, and the March 8th all do work well for a lot of reasons, whether it's in between sport things or whatever. The season, in between seasons and some of those things. So just any other questions, I'll feel free to answer.
Okay. And then I saw
Yeah,
Lorenzo's
that's
hand
helpful.
and then Karen's hand.
Okay, thanks. Oh, I have to lower my hand. Okay, so I think in general, I want to say something about the Saturdays versus Sundays, and then I want to say something about the potential of January 4th, and then I want to throw on the table another alternative slash swap. So relative in order from Saturday, Sunday, I think that we as a body voted to remove some holidays off our calendar this year under the pretense that if we cannot honor all religions, we shouldn't be honoring some religions by taking some days off. And I wish to explicitly acknowledge that that maybe put me in a bad light with my own religious body, but I believe very firmly in that premise. And we cannot possibly honor every religion. We wouldn't have any days left to go to school, basically. So, relative to Saturdays and Sundays, I think that consideration of religion should not, yeah, it would be great if we could be even Steven, but I don't know that we should, quote unquote, hurt ourselves to try to work around that. And as Dr. Silva said, no matter what, we cannot make everybody happy. Relative to January 4th, I think that's a great idea. If we can pull it off and get one under our belt early, I think that would be fantastic. I would say we could even leave the January 25th one on as well. And then that would give us the break of the May Day that several people have already expressed a concern about. My last item, keeping on May for a second, that May Day that everybody seems so concerned about, we could potentially, I floated this idea the other night, hold out and wait to see what the snow brings us, and very, much later in the spring, vote to change that May Saturday to take it off the calendar and put it onto a day in June. I know people don't like dealing with changes, but again, I just kind of want to put a footnote there. That is one way to deal with that May date if we're really very concerned about the May date. And finally, in February, I would like to suggest that we change the February date from the 8th to the 22nd, using the same rationale of why we picked January 25th. Meaning that it is a holiday Monday, and so it would be a week that we would still get a 5-day week instead of making a 6-day week on some other week.
I saw Karen's hand, Ken Ann's hand, and then I'll call on myself. Thank you.
Thank you. So a lot of people have brought up a lot of things I've been thinking about. First of all, Dr. Silva, I think I have to agree that it's a lot of Saturdays that we have out there. And if we can figure out anything about making any changes, I think that would be, in our best interest. I think that we need to be flexible. We would see how this works and, maybe make some adjustments from there. And I do think it might be important to, survey our families to see what they think, because I mean, there's so many things that happen on Saturdays, and I think we brought up a lot of them at our meeting the other night. Students who don't live in Beverly on the weekends, any athletics that have already been paid for, and people pay a lot for sports outside of school or any extracurricular activities. I would hate to see people have to make that choice to between school and something that's costing them thousands of dollars. And then if the choice is made, it would be, if we don't meet I don't know what the deal is with this 50% threshold. Is is that for sure, or is that just something that is in normal times and maybe not in extraordinary circumstances? I just feel like there's a lot of information that we still need to know. And that's why I want us to make sure that we're flexible as we move ahead and flexible to make changes if we need to.
Thank you. We'll call in Kenyan, myself, Jeffrey, and then Lorinda.
Yeah, I think they're all really good points. And I guess the way that I've been trying to survey families is I did post on my page just saying this is, sort of where we're leaning, saying that it was not a final decision. We also had to consider costs. So I think with the cost considerations and Saturday considerations, I just still want to underscore two things. There is no perfect fit, and there are families who are bracing themselves for it and understand that they have to be made up. I think if we can eliminate as many Saturdays as possible, that would be ideal. But I do not think we have maximized where there are release days that we could maybe make full days. And that feels to me like a day people will already expect their children to be going to school. So maybe it's less, sort of less painful on the schedule. I do not think I feel comfortable about 2 Saturdays in January, the 4th and the 25th. So I think we should maybe think about if that will be an undue burden that 1 month for families who do in fact live outside of Beverly. So I'm leaning to staying with the dates we have for January, particularly because we have this question of whether it will even be approved. But seeing if we could really give some thought to the early release dates, because I think it will also seem a little strange to families to have early release days and then have Saturdays. At least, the sense I got from a few people is like, what, just even having an early release day this week, they were sort of like, why are we doing that if we have to make up school? So yeah. I think people might be prepared for that.
Thanks. I wanted to respond to one of the comments Ms. Visnick made about the 22nd of February. I think I have a lot of concern that people are already going to miss 4 instructional days, and it would be a real disservice to those families to miss then a 5th day. So I would encourage us to keep February 8th. I know it makes a 6-day week, but I just really am worried about the loss of instructional time for families who have February plans they do not plan to change. I think Jeffrey, you're next, and then Lorinda.
I was just going to comment on if there is a poll that's put out there to the public that that poll should include bullets on what can count and what can and cannot count. Just because I've seen a lot of statements about things that we know will not count, like extending the day to make up hours, just so that they understand the parameters that we're also that we're considering when we come up with this solution. That's my comment.
And Lorinda.
Thank you. I guess I'll acknowledge the January 4th concerns. Absolutely. Like we've said multiple times, there's trade-offs. Every idea has some negative associated with it. So I just want to say I agree. 2 in 1 month would be kind of harsh. At the same time, I kind of liked the idea of if we could get one under our belt and get the ball rolling, especially given that we could maybe get the May date off because so many people have expressed concerns relative to the May date. But what I really want to say is I think that the idea that we might reconsider our vote from Wednesday night is troublesome to me. We already made a statement, and Dr. Kinsey DeFranza, I don't understand why you said, oh, we haven't decided this yet. We did, in fact, take a vote on Wednesday night, and we voted.
I should clarify, I didn't say we didn't decide. I said that per my understanding, we had to get approval for the funding for it. That's what my statement says. We voted to do this. We still have to, because everybody was like, well, what about, we have to make sure this is a funded opportunity since Saturday is not typical. So I did qualify that it does need to go forward for funding. So just to be clear. So I want to make sure, because we just agreed and we're clear that when we make a decision, that's our decision. But I wanted the public to understand that there was a funding implication of Saturdays. That was still a decision that had to get put forward. Is that correct? Is that not what we?
I
on
don't
this?
think there was a qualifying statement. I also saw your Facebook post and was a little confused by it, but
Yeah, I remember Dr. Trochek saying this will have to get funded and that we would have to request it. Is that not the case, Dr. Trochek?
It has to be funded. There will be a cost that we incur. I guess I think that Lorinda had made a suggestion that we might go to the city for the funding and then try to include it in strike costs. We have a meeting coming up and would probably try to do that, but we would have to fund it anyway, and we would just find a way to do that. We would have to just tap into revolving. I think it will be funded. However we do it, it's just where that funding will come from.
Yeah, I misunderstood that it was the funding was a given, but I don't think I was unclear that that's where we voted.
Dr. Trochek, I saw your hand. Oh,
yeah, that's all right. I was just Dot's looking for the link. I thought it was on the calendar. Did she not get that?
On the agenda, and I thought I invited her. I will send it to her.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, I put my hand up just as I've been taking notes as everybody's been asking. So just to sort of respond to each one of the around the operational, considerations so that you would know them as you go. So first, I would just from an operational standpoint, I appreciate the suggestion that Lorinda had about keeping the 12th on the books, but canceling it should we not need it. As opposed to trying to find a day later to add in. I think operationally that, and as well as it's our expectation that teachers will be reserving these days and know that they need to report to school. So if for the educators, it would be better for them to have that one on the books and then be able to say, okay, we're going to slide that into June because we didn't use snow days. I think that's what you were suggesting. So if that's how I heard you, I was going to also say to Rachel the same thing Rachel said around the adding to the February vacation. As it stands now, the way that we're adding the February vacation, it's kind of like a 33% balance across the different ways that we've done it, right? We've done 33% of the vacation time, looking at almost 33%. And if you went down to 4 days, it would actually be almost exact for Saturdays. And then the others at the end of the year. I think that with the December 23rd took one of those days away. But I think that my feedback is coming in. Please don't take this vacation. Please don't add Saturdays. Please don't add them to the end of the year in equal buckets, right? So it's really just true that it's going to be really hard to satisfy all. And I would prefer not to penalize folks that are going away in February with yet another day in that same week, because I think that's a challenge for the families that have already expressed that they can't be there in February. So one response to normal versus extraordinary. I think, Karen, one of the questions that you had asked, or maybe it was Canan around, I want to be clear. It has been made infinitely clear to me by the Department of Ed. They do not consider a strike extraordinary. They consider weather extraordinary. They consider a building that has a catastrophic operational failure that closes school extraordinary. They're not willing to consider strikes as extraordinary events. So I just would be clear on that in terms of waivers, in terms of, what they're going to change or do. In response to Canan around the half days, we are, I think it's our intention to turn all of the early release days into full days at this point in time to capture instructional time.
Okay. And so that helps to clarify that.
And I agree with you. Parents are, I agree. There was a lot of feedback around keeping the conference days. The challenge with the conference days is A, they're contractual, B, they're tied to that first trimester of the K-8 reporting. And we would have had to switch them to evenings or something like that. And there just wasn't enough time to do that. Mm-hmm. One of the pieces of the return to work says that we have to give 30 days notice to the union. And we did work through the December 23rd date. Whether we could work through the 4th or not, we probably could fairly easily, but that the 2 conference days were just right on top of when everything happened. And that would have been super challenging, I think. And what, in terms of what can and cannot count, that's a great, I mean, I've had actually awesome conversations with parents. Like, so I took the strategy this week. I'm not emailing people back. I'm picking up the phone and calling them and answering their questions. So I've had multiple conversations with parents, and it's been great to hear sort of their, and as I said, it's been pretty split across the board as to what people are thinking. In terms of what can count and not count, I will continue to kind of reiterate that one of the documents that we're working on as a group, Mark Thomas and the cabinet and I will work together, is sort of a guidelines for makeup days. So a lot of questions about the FAs and what that does at high school, what to make up, what's entailed, what does it mean that there's no penalty, what work is going to be covered, what happens, how is the makeup work going to be done? I mean, families have a lot of questions about all of these things, and so we're working on putting together a kind of, at least before we break for the holiday, a more comprehensive understanding for families around what our intention is around the makeup days. So that's something. And then I just wrote down 2 in 1 month. I hear the January, that 2 in a month is a lot. But I also do wonder about winter days being better than spring days. So that's all. Those are my kind of, just in answering the questions that I was hearing as we were going forward.
Yeah, thank you. It's a lot of moving parts, and hopefully I did not give anyone the impression that we were not deciding to do that. I just wanted to be clear that there was an additional cost, because that came up in our school committee meeting, and that was a question parents were raising for me, which is, where's the funding coming from? And my answer was that we had to allocate that somehow. It didn't seem like it was clear to me that it was a given, but glad to know that. And thanks for, considering those other options. And like you, I think it's better to just sort of level with people very clearly about where we are. And so I appreciate you looking through all those options.
Great. I can't find the hand raise button for myself, so I've had my hand up. I'm going to call myself real quickly, Lorinda, and then Karen. I just wanted to remind folks about the April 1st date. Like, once April 1st passes, we don't have to worry as much about weather-related closures. And so I was, in terms of making them up, I was going to suggest that we make a motion to accept the calendar as Dr. Chorocek had presented it in our packet, with a note to ourselves that we will revisit it closer to April 1st. And if we can potentially remove the April and the May dates, but especially the May 10th date, that we could consider moving them. But I think for planning purposes, it would be better to have a calendar out there where people can make plans, and then we can pleasantly surprise them later if possible. I do worry that not having the days early in the year will change graduation again. And I think people were pretty upset that graduation moved from June 1st now to June 8th. And I worry that if we don't have the days sooner rather than later, similar to what Dr. Churchick said about winter's better than spring, that we could potentially put graduation in jeopardy unintentionally. And I think that, moving forward with this calendar as it was presented is probably a safer bet, even though, no option is great. Okay, so Lorinda and then Karen.
I'm tempted to second your motion just for the sake of conversation.
I don't know if I made the motion. I said this.
Okay. Well, good because I'm not wild about revisiting the April date, because as I mentioned the other night, I think to an educator, they would tell you that a day earlier in the year is way better than a day in June. And so I recognize the May date has lots of problems, and I love the idea of revisiting it. But so your motion as read, I would offer you a friendly amendment that we only revisit the May date, if in fact you make that motion.
I'm not making the motion yet. Well, let's hear from Karen, and then someone can make the motion.
What I had my hand really raised about, I didn't know if you needed a second on your motion. I want to acknowledge Dr. Silva's comment in the chat about the costs. We talked about it in FNF, and we talked about it a little bit in the big meeting. But as the chair of FNF, I do believe our Saturday costs fit in with the other strike costs. And I'll remind our body that we voted and we chose to waive all of those costs as part of an incentive to get our teachers back in the classroom and to get our children back in school. And now we need to figure out how we're going to make that work. And I'm going to leave it there because probably some of the things that we talked about happened in executive session. It just suffice to say that we had these conversations and we understood the ramifications of waiving all those costs that were incurred relative to the strike. I wish to acknowledge the February dilemma, and I didn't make it as a motion, but if it were, I would be withdrawing it. I really, I think subconsciously forgot that that was the retracted February vacation week, and I agree fully that people who are already missing should not be quote unquote tortured with missing yet another day. And last but not least, I appreciate Dr. Chirocek, the pointing out that we're really close to the one-third, one-third, one-third. And, in terms of trying to be as fair as possible to different people, different constituencies who want different things. And if in fact we revisit the May date, we will end up being one-third of each kind of approach. And I don't know that it's going to get any better than that. So I'm feeling good about that. And I feel like way less pressure or stress about the unhappiness because yeah, we all are getting comments, but like somebody else has mentioned, I'm getting comments on all sides of all of our options. Oh, take April vacation instead, right? But then I have people like, don't take April vacation. So anyway, we have precious few options given our situation, and I feel good about the one-third, one-third, one-third. Thank you.
Okay, Karen?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that my question wasn't really about making up strike days and like waivers. It was more about like what happens with the 50% if we don't, if we don't get to 50%, what happens? So that's one question. And then just something else that's come up. So when we, and this may be a question, when we got rid of a lot of holidays, our last day of school was moved to earlier in June. For years, wasn't our graduation, for years, wasn't our last day more in the 20 something of June? I mean, I remember going to school one day until June 28th. And graduation was still the beginning of June. It's always been the beginning of June. So I'm just a little bit like, well, why is that really an issue? Like we've had school into later June. And if we have to, I mean, it's not ideal. Nothing's ideal, but I guess I'm just trying to figure that out.
Yeah, so we have a federal holiday added to June and we have climate change. So I think that's part of the bigger deal.
And if I were to I believe that the scrutiny of the 12-day is very heightened this year based upon the actions that happened on the North Shore. And so that was in particular, the Department of Ed called us to remind us that 12-day requirement was on. I don't know how tightly policed it has been in past years. And I would also remind you that this year we started after Labor Day, which every once in a while our contract has us starting after Labor Day instead of before Labor Day. So that also pushed us a little further. We would have been one of the reasons one of the considerations we had when we were looking at the calendar around the holidays was that this year in particular was already going to be pushed well into the 20s just without snow days because of the later start and because of the way the calendar and the number of elections that we had. So it was just a unique year that we benefited from this year early. But you're right, often in the past, the date that it counts is the last scheduled day. So right now for us, the last scheduled day is the 20th as we go. And so if we do the snow makeup days, go on top of it and don't go into the subtraction problem to get to graduation day, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So typically our scheduled day is somewhere around the 16th or the 17th, and then our snow days push us into the 20s. And so, and there is just increased scrutiny. So I don't know if that helped. I also wanted to, there was another question. Oh, the 50% question, Karen, is a good one. I'm getting that from a lot of directions. Honestly, I don't know anyone's never met the 50%. I don't know what that would look like. I'm not gravely concerned about the 50%. However, I hope the public understands that's because I believe that our parents and families and, really want their kids to have these days and get them in and get them under their belt. And we're certainly not penalizing people for pre-existing travel or pre-existing plans, but certainly hoping to make sure that folks are maximizing and coming to school on that day. And I think the 50% is a relatively low threshold in terms of, we're typically at 95% attendance. So maybe that puts it into perspective a little bit, right? Typically 5% of our students are absent on a single day. And so getting down to 50% is really a lot of kids missing. And I think we also acknowledge as, talked with the building leaders, finding a way to make sure families are well aware of the importance of attendance on these days and really making sure that we're making our strong attendance efforts to get folks to come on those days. And I think Jeff asked a question as well about a dismissal or a late arrival would still be counted as attendance. They would still be counted as present. So that was a great question in thinking about it. So if someone had an obligation at 9 o'clock in the morning and came in at 10:30, they would still count as present.
And I was just thinking of that as some comments came up about students working on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. If they had to be dismissed.
If they work in the afternoon, then they can still go to school and then work.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I don't see any more hands, and I'm noticing we're at almost the top of the hour here. I would like to make a motion now that we adopt the calendar as Dr. Chirochek had presented it, with January 25th and then the second Saturdays of February, March, April, and May, understanding that the school committee has the option to revisit.
Second.
Thank you. Is there further discussion about that approach?
Just to clarify, so we're going to present that calendar. We're not concerned about the funding. That's going to happen. And we will leave the early release days as is, or is that included in the numbers we're talking about?
There's only one.
Well, there's March 12th and there's May 23rd. And then there's the last day of school, whichever day that is, whether it's June 20th or beyond. I'm happy if this committee's, I would be in favor of not having them be early release days in capturing the instructional time. So if you want to include that or have the second motion on that, I'm happy to do that.
I'll make a friendly amendment to my motion to have this.
Thank you. I'm sorry, it's confusing. Yep. I don't have the calendar in front of me, and I just thought if there was a way, if you were okay with that and it was possible to do, it would give us the 30-day lead time for the request, and we would already have school in motion. So yes, if there is a friendly amendment to that, Rachel, I appreciate it.
Okay. So
I have a question. Is the point of that if we remove those early release dates, then any given Saturday could be a shorter Saturday? That the Saturdays would be our early release days instead?
I think that's my thought. I'm probably
that Saturdays wouldn't have to be a full day.
Well, they would be a full day, but they'd be shortened.
Yes,
but they wouldn't be a full-on early release. Yeah, they wouldn't be a full-on early release.
I think you said 4.5 hours.
Yeah.
Lunch.
They wouldn't go, whatever we could do to make it full, but not as long. I'm sorry.
Correct.
Okay.
I'm going to restate my entire motion, and then I'll ask Dr. Silva if he still seconds it. So we adopt as presented with Saturday, January 25th, and then the second Saturday of February through May, with the early release days to be converted to full days of March 12th, May 23rd, and June 20th. allowing Dr. Chirocek to shorten the length of Saturdays per guidance of DESI approval, right? 4.5 with
Under the, I just say under the guidance of under the guidance that's already there. I don't probably want to
under
engage in
guidance of
another
DESI.
whole
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah. Okay. So that is my new stated motion. Dr. Silva, do you
Second.
still second that? Thank you. Okay. Are we clear on the motion?
Yes.
Do we have any further conversation? Karen?
If I don't vote for this, it's just because I don't think that this is clear enough. I appreciate all the work that people have put into this. So just throwing that out there.
Is there anything we can do to clarify?
Probably not at this point. I just feel like I'd like to see a survey go out. I'd like to see some, I just like to, I don't know. I just don't think that this is specific enough for me to vote a yes on. But like I said, I appreciate the work that's going into this.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I'll call the roll. Mayor Cahill is still absent. Kim is also absent. Can-Ann Mackenzie DeFranza.
Yes.
Karen Robinson.
No.
Jeffrey Silva.
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick.
Yes.
Rachel Abel, yes. 4-1 with 2 absences. The motion is passed, and we can ask Dr. Chirocek to get this new information updated and published so that our community can adjust their calendars and save the dates, so to speak. I think that brings us to the end of our agenda today. I want to thank everyone for meeting on short notice. I know that our Unit B members will appreciate our business office getting right to work Monday morning. And I will now entertain a motion to adjourn at.
Oh, sorry.
Did you include in the motion that the early release days are changed to full days? Or is that a separate
Yes.
motion?
No,
Okay.
I included that.
Okay.
The March 12th, May 23rd, and June 20th.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Motion
Thank
to
you.
adjourn.
Sorry about that.
Thank you, Lorinda.
Second.
Thank you, Karen. It's not debatable. Mayor Cahill absent, Kim Coyle absent, Can-Ann Mackenzie DeFranza.
Yes.
Karen Robinson.
Yes.
Jeff Silva.
Yes.
You want to stay. Lorinda.
Yes.
And Rachel Abel, yes. We're in agreement at 10:57 a.m. The Committee of the Whole is now adjourned. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday.
If I
Thank
don't
you.
see you guys,
Good luck,
surgery is-
Lorinda.
I was
Yeah,
just
good
gonna
luck,
say,
Lorinda.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
My surgery, I got the